In this worksheet called Choose, in column B, we'd like to put in the quarter for each of the dates that we see in column A. Many of you are familiar perhaps with a function called month equal month. When we apply this to a date cell, it's going to return the number of the month, in this case, of course, 3. It's the third month for March. We possibly could look up what the quarter for this is based on information the way we're seeing it in columns D, E, and F. But by getting the number here, that doesn't quite work. Well, we could do a lookup here on these two columns, and then when we see a 3, then we know the quarter is going to be a 1. Or possibly you know how to write a mathematical formula here that simply takes the quarter, maybe uses the mod function or divides it by 3, or there's some technique for coming up with the number that way. There's also another lookup type function called choose, and it's similar to VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, at least in terms of concept, but it's radically different in how it's set up. The choose function allows us to essentially embed all the answers in the actual function. Now let's start with the idea that this function here is valuable because it tells us which quarter a month actually is in. I'm going to put the word choose in front of this. This is the function. The choose function begins with some value that's either calculated or picked up out of a cell. For this very first case, we know this is going to be a 3. But of course, what could it be? Any number from 1 through 12. That's it. Those are the only possibilities here. After placing a comma here, we now put in the 12 different answers translated. For example, if month A2 is 1, meaning January, then we want this to be first quarter. If it's a 2, it's first quarter. If it's 3, it's first quarter. So for the first 3 answers here, we want 1. So if month A2 happens to be equal to a 3, here's our answer. If it's equal to a 2, here's our answer. What if it's equal to 4? That's April. What does that mean? Second quarter. So now we're going to have 3 2s, and you can figure out the rest, of course, 3 3s and 3 4s. We are providing 12 answers. If month A2 happens to be equal to 7, what's our 7th choice here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There it is. And what does that mean? Third quarter. Closing parenthesis. There we go. Double click, and we see what's happening. So you can easily see what's going on there. If you work for the federal government or possibly other organizations where the fiscal year doesn't match the chronological year, you want to change these numbers. So in the federal government, for example, January, February, March are in the second quarter. So if these happen to be equal to 1, 2, or 3, in other words, if this happens to be equal to 1, 2, or 3, it's the second quarter. So our first 3 answers here will not be 1s, but they'll be 2s. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum here, if the answers are 10, 11, or 12, meaning October, November, or December, then these are in the first quarter. So we see how this plays out. So if your fiscal year begins in October, here are the kinds of answers you'd want. Perhaps the heading might say FY quarter, but that's how it will play out. So you can use the choose function for a variety of situations. It's not nearly as capable as a VLOOKUP table could be, but for certain kinds of situations, it's compact. And the big advantage is we don't need any external table. We don't need anything like we're seeing in columns D, E, and F. The choose function has all of our answers embedded in the actual function.